Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My husband and I have been together for 15 years, and early in our marriage, we knew we wanted to start a family. After trying for several years without success, we decided to look into adoption. That's how our beautiful daughter came into our lives 9 years ago. She was just 2 years old when we met her, and the circumstances of her adoption were both heartbreaking and inspiring. Her birth mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer during pregnancy, but chose to forego treatment to carry the pregnancy to term. It was the most selfless act of love I've ever witnessed. We've always been open with our daughter about her adoption, celebrating her birth mother's courage and love as part of her story. Everything was going well until this year. Middle school started, and with it came the worst experience of our lives. It began subtly, whispers in the hallway, snide comments, the usual preteen drama. But then someone found out about her adoption, and things took a dark turn. When I mentioned the school had called that day and asked if something had happened, she tried to brush it off, saying she was fine. I noticed her red eyes and asked if she'd been crying. That's when she broke down and told me what they'd said, that her real mom didn't want her, and that's why she was given away. My heart shattered. I hugged her tight and tried to reassure her, but the damage was already done. We immediately contacted the school. I told them the bullying needed to stop because it was affecting our daughter's mental health. The principal gave us the same response we'd heard before, claiming they took these matters seriously and would look into it. When I pointed out they'd been saying that for weeks, they just responded that these situations were delicate and needed to be handled appropriately. But they didn't handle it at all. The bullying got worse. A group of girls, led by this one particular student, let's call her Karen Jr., started following my daughter through the halls, taunting her constantly. Then came the day that pushed me over the edge. My daughter came home with her hair butchered. They had cut off her ponytail during class while calling her names and laughing at her. My husband was livid. He demanded to know how this could have happened during class and where the teacher had been. Our daughter explained that the teacher had been at her desk and didn't see it. I couldn't believe it. How could a teacher not notice or hear a group of students attacking another student? We walked straight to the school the next day. The principal tried to downplay the situation, saying they understood our concern. When I pointed out that this was assault, that they had physically attacked our daughter, the principal just wanted to avoid escalation and suggested having a talk with the students involved. My husband was incredulous, pointing out that our daughter was terrified to come to school, and all they wanted to do was have a talk. That's when we decided enough was enough. We contacted a lawyer, and suddenly, everyone changed their tune. Karen's mother reached out with apologies, promising they would make sure their daughter apologized. The principal suddenly announced they'd decided to move the student to a different class, effective immediately. When I called them out on only taking action after a lawyer got involved, they had no response. We didn't back down. The lawyer helped us file complaints against both the school and Karen Jr.'s parents. We included everything: documentation of every incident, emails, pictures of my daughter's hair, and witness statements from other students who had seen the bullying. The school board got involved, and suddenly the principal was on administrative leave pending an investigation. The teacher who didn't see the hair-cutting incident was suspended. Karen Jr.'s parents had to pay for my daughter's therapy and hair restoration treatments. We ended up transferring our daughter to a private school that specializes in creating inclusive environments. She's doing much better now, making new friends who appreciate her for who she is. The last we heard, the school district implemented new anti-bullying policies with actual consequences, and Karen Jr.'s parents had to attend mandatory parenting classes as part of the settlement. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we hadn't taken legal action. The school system failed my daughter, but we weren't going to fail her too. No child should ever have to endure what she went through, and no parent should have to fight this hard to protect their child at school. I always knew my mom was terrible with money. She'd buy whatever caught her eye, take loans, she couldn't repay and somehow always managed to drag others into her financial mess. My grandpa, bless his heart, had bailed her out countless times, but this time was different. I got a call from my grandpa late one night. His voice was steady, but I could tell he was shaken. He told me about some men who had come to his house that day, explaining that while they call themselves debt collectors, they didn't act like any he'd ever seen before. When I asked what happened, he explained that my mother had apparently taken a loan from some shady people. They were saying she owed them $60,000 now, with interest, and they had come to his house looking for her. When I asked if they had threatened him, he confirmed they had. They told him if he didn't make her pay up in a month, they would return with guns and take his house, claiming they had paperwork proving she'd used it as collateral. I knew right then these weren't legitimate debt collectors. My mom had forged documents again, probably using my grandpa's house as collateral without his knowledge. She'd done similar things before, but never with such dangerous people. When I called my mom about it, her response was exactly what I expected. She dismissed the whole thing, saying it wasn't her problem anymore and they could take his house for all she cared, since she was moving to Florida the next week anyway. When I protested that she couldn't just leave Grandpa to deal with this, she brushed me off, saying he had money and could handle it, adding that they were probably just bluffing anyway. That was the last time I heard from her. She changed her number the next day and actually moved to Florida, leaving my grandpa to deal with her mess. But what these thugs didn't know was that my grandpa wasn't just some helpless old man. He'd served in Vietnam, and even at 72, he kept his military training sharp. For the next month, Grandpa prepared his property. He called the police to report the threats, but without proof, they couldn't do much except file a report. He installed security cameras, set up motion sensors, and yes, even placed some carefully concealed traps around his property. He might be old, but he wasn't going down without a fight. Exactly 1 month later, they came back. I was visiting Grandpa that day, and we were both ready. 3 men in black suits pulled up in a fancy car around midnight. We watched them on the security cameras as they approached the house. The first guy stepped right into a bear trap hidden under some leaves. His scream echoed through the night as the trap clamped down on his leg. The second guy rushed forward, gun drawn, but Grandpa was ready. From his position at an upstairs window, he fired a single shot with his hunting rifle, hitting the man right in the kneecap. The third guy, clearly not expecting any resistance, ducked behind their car and fired blindly at the house a few times before jumping in and speeding off, leaving his injured partners behind. The whole thing was over in less than 5 minutes. The police arrived shortly after. We called them the moment we spotted the car approaching. They found the 2 injured men exactly where they'd fallen, along with their illegal weapons and some very interesting documents in their car. Turns out these guys were part of a known loan shark operation the police had been trying to bust for months. When they questioned Grandpa, he just showed them the police report he'd filed a month ago about the threats, along with security camera footage of both visits. The cops could hardly keep from smiling as they took the 2 men into custody after the paramedics treated them. One of the officers asked Grandpa, somewhat amused, if he had really taken their threat to come back with guns as a warning to prepare. Grandpa simply responded that when you've been through what he had, you'll learn to take threats seriously, and everything he did was to protect his property and himself. The third guy was caught trying to leave the state 3 days later. They all ended up facing multiple charges: attempted armed robbery, assault with deadly weapons, loan sharking, and forgery. Turns out they'd been running this scam for years, forcing people out of their homes with forged documents and threats. As for my mom, she eventually got caught up in her own mess down in Florida. Last I heard, she was facing charges for multiple counts of fraud and forgery. Grandpa didn't press charges against her, but he did finally stop enabling her behavior. He changed all his documents, removed her from his will, and made sure she could never use his name or property for her schemes again. The loan sharks are serving long prison sentences now. The police found dozens of other victims who came forward after hearing about what happened at Grandpa's house. Turns out my grandpa didn't just protect his own home. He helped bring down an entire criminal operation. Later, when I mentioned to Grandpa that most people his age would have just paid them off or moved out, he replied that he hadn't spent 2 tours in Vietnam to let some thugs take his home, adding that someone had to teach them that not every old man is an easy target. I've been working at this retail store in Washington State for almost 2 years now. Started as a regular day shift employee, but switched to the night shift about 8 months ago when my husband got a promotion that required him to travel during the day. The night shift paid better anyway, and I actually enjoyed the quieter atmosphere. My team was small but efficient, just 4 of us keeping the store stocked and organized for the morning crew. Everything was going smoothly until last week. I had just found out I was pregnant, and after keeping it to myself for a few weeks, I finally decided to share the news with my team. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags when I made the announcement. My supervisor just gave a tight smile and mumbled, "Congratulations," while my co-workers avoided eye contact and quickly changed the subject. Still, I tried to convince myself I was just being oversensitive. The next night was when everything went wrong. I arrived at work as usual just before midnight in the middle of a heavy rainstorm. The store was dark and locked up tight, normal for that hour. I went to the employee entrance like I always did, pulled out my key card and swiped it across the scanner. Nothing happened. I tried again and again. The scanner just kept showing invalid every time I swiped. This had never happened before, not once in all my time working there. I stood there getting soaked, trying to figure out what to do. I pulled out my phone and called the store's main number, but all I got was an automated message telling me the store was closed and listing their business hours. I tried swiping my card about 20 more times, then started Googling solutions for keycard problems. Maybe I was holding it wrong? Maybe the magnetic strip was damaged. I tried everything I could find online, but nothing worked. After about 30 minutes of standing in the pouring rain, I remembered the security camera above the door. I turned to face it directly, held up my phone with my work schedule clearly displayed, and pointed to it. I even pulled out my employee badge and showed it to the camera. At least this way, there would be proof that I had shown up for my shift. My husband called right then asking if I was okay and why I hadn't texted him about getting in safely. I explained that I couldn't get in because my key card wasn't working and there was nobody there to help. He immediately told me to come home, saying it wasn't safe for me or the baby to stay out in this weather. He was right. I was completely drenched and shivering at this point. The next morning, I called Human Resources as soon as the store opened. I tried to explain what happened with my shift and how my key card had stopped working, but the HR representative cut me off, saying they had noticed my absence and it counted as a no call, no show. When I protested and tried to explain that I was there and they could check the security footage, they just repeated that they had strict policies about attendance and I had abandoned my position. I kept trying to argue my case, pointing out that I had shown my schedule to the camera and tried calling the store, asking what else I could have done. The HR representative simply stated that the decision was final and they would mail my final paycheck. That's when I realized they weren't even listening to me. They'd already decided to fire me, probably right after I announced my pregnancy. The keycard malfunction was just their excuse. I hung up and immediately called the workers' union representative instead of wasting more time with Human Resources. The union rep was shocked when I told them what happened. They couldn't believe I'd been fired like this and asked why I hadn't come to them first. When I admitted I didn't know I should have and thought HR would help resolve this, they assured me they would handle everything. They instructed me to document everything that happened, especially the timing between my pregnancy announcement and this incident, and told me they would file a formal grievance. Things moved quickly after that. The union brought in their lawyers who requested the security footage from that night. Surprise, surprise. The footage clearly showed me standing in the rain, trying my card repeatedly, and showing my schedule to the camera. They also discovered that my key card access had been remotely deactivated just hours after I announced my pregnancy. The store director tried to claim it was a system glitch, but the timestamps were damning. 3 weeks of legal proceedings later, I was not only reinstated with back pay, but also received a significant settlement for discrimination. My supervisor was demoted, and HR had to undergo mandatory training on pregnancy discrimination laws. I'm back at work now, but on a different shift with a much more supportive team. The store had to implement a new emergency contact system for night shift workers, all because they tried to force out one pregnant employee and failed spectacularly. I've worked in state government for over 30 years, and let me tell you about how a group of us gave management a taste of their own medicine. We called ourselves the unpromotables, not by choice, but because that's what they made us. See, in government jobs, everything's supposed to be fair. You take tests for promotions, and if you score high, you're supposed to get first dibs on the job. It's all meant to be about merit, not favoritism, but oh boy, did management hate that system. I started as an entry-level accountant after getting my accounting degree. I was good at my job, really good. Won awards for productivity, came up with better ways to do things, and always went above and beyond. But there was one tiny problem. I actually cared about doing things right. During one team meeting, I brought up how we were processing forms incorrectly according to state law and suggested we adjust our procedure. My boss shut me down immediately, saying we'd always done it that way and didn't want to rock the boat. When I tried to show the relevant section of law I'd brought, they just cut me off and moved on to the next topic. I wasn't the only one dealing with this. There were others like me, competent people who kept scoring top marks on promotion exams but never seemed to get anywhere. We started finding each other through the promotion lists. One day, a co-worker reached out after seeing my name on the senior analyst list. They asked if I'd applied for the position in Department B. When I said yes but wasn't hopeful, they mentioned they were in the same boat and invited me to lunch, saying there were others like us. That's how our little group formed. We'd meet for lunch or drinks after work, sharing our stories of being passed over for promotions despite being the most qualified. But then we had an idea that changed everything. During one of our meetups, I suggested we should apply for everything we were qualified for, not just the jobs we wanted. When one co-worker asked if that meant every single position, even the terrible ones, I confirmed that was exactly what I meant. They couldn't promote their favorites if we were in the top 3. Another co-worker called me evil, but loved the idea. So that's what we did. Every promotion exam, every opening, we were there. Management's favorite brown-nosers couldn't get promoted because we kept scoring higher on the tests. They tried every trick in the book to get around us. In one instance, a department head tried telling me they were holding off on filling a position. When I pointed out how the department would remain understaffed, they nervously claimed they were reorganizing. I casually mentioned how the union might be interested in these coincidental reorganizations happening whenever qualified candidates applied. The department head just shuffled their papers nervously and had no response. We knew our rights under state civil service law better than they did. Once, a manager tried to tell me they were choosing a lower-scoring candidate because of special qualifications. When I started citing Section 143.2 of the Civil Service Law about candidate selection, they quickly backtracked and canceled the position entirely. This went on for years. I even almost got promoted once. The hiring manager had started my paperwork, congratulating me on getting the senior position. Just as I was expressing my relief after all those years, the big boss barged in and stopped everything. They claimed they couldn't lose me from my current position because I was too valuable there. When the hiring manager tried to argue that I was the most qualified and they needed someone, the big boss shut them down and canceled the position. The whole thing became a running joke in the office. The unpromotable employees who were too good at their jobs to get promoted. Management would rather leave positions empty than promote any of us. But here's where my story takes a turn from the original. After about 20 years of this, the state appointed a new director of civil service, someone who actually cared about merit-based promotions. They started investigating departments with patterns of canceled promotions and suspicious hiring practices. The new director came to our office one day and confronted our big boss about the concerning patterns in our department's promotion history. When the big boss tried claiming everything was by the book, the director revealed they had documented 30 cases of canceled promotions after qualified candidates applied and demanded an explanation. The investigation revealed years of promotion manipulation. Several managers were forced to retire early. Others were demoted. The new administration did a complete overhaul of the promotion system, adding oversight and transparency. Remember those positions they kept canceling? They all opened up at once. Within 6 months, every member of the unpromotables finally got the promotions they deserved. I ended up 2 levels higher than my old position, with a corner office and a view. My old boss now reports to me. Turns out doing things the right way and knowing the rules paid off in the end. I didn't have to take early retirement. Instead, I got to help rebuild the department the right way. Just last week, my former big boss tried pulling their old "we've always done it this way" line in a meeting. I just smiled, pulled out the civil service regulations, and suggested we review that policy. The look on their face was worth every single year of waiting. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.